Okay, thank you for coming to the show, John. We're starting just slightly early. We're getting used to doing these live streams. I have to click a lot of buttons, but we do have some people in X Spaces right now. Hopefully, we'll get more. For the ones that are in X Spaces, it'll allow you to ask a question throughout the show. Just request the mic. I'll give it to you, and we'll have your questions answered. The ones that are watching the stream on YouTube, you can type in the chat, and I'll also read questions if that's what you prefer. But this is supposed to be interactive, and this is a new format that we've been doing. I think this is the third show. This is part 27 of a long series. And thank you again for coming onto the show, John. And how you doing?
Oh, it's been really busy, busy in the world, busy in, I've been doing a lot of readings for the new year. Seems like there's a great interest for that. And so I have been uh, almost doing a reading every day but Sunday. And there are 7 slots left for this month. So if you go to hogueprophecy.com, everybody, and if you go there right at the beginning, at the top of the page, you will see a little ad about get a reading with John Hogue. It's in red, so you can see it, and there's a little email there that you can type in on. All you need to do is put Hogue reading in the subject line, and with all the hundreds of emails I get, I will immediately see those pop up, and then I will contact you as soon as I see them and give you the information on how to do what I'm going to do in the reading, what are the times available around the world and in America. And yeah, basically, it's me taking my world reading and putting it into a one-on-one for just you for this new year. This year, by the way, last year I called it the year of reckoning. This year I'm calling the year of surprises and revolutions.
All right. So before we begin with the show, I should have said this at the very beginning. The ones that are watching on YouTube with the live stream and the recording, I'll be playing this again throughout the week. And the ones on X Spaces, just so you know, I have John's links in the description box of this video and all my videos. So you can click that link. That will take you to his website so you can get his periodical and do the readings as he mentioned. I apologize for not mentioning that earlier. I'm clicking a lot of buttons, keeping.
There's a lot of moving parts, so we're both getting used to it.
All right, so I just put that in the chat, the link for your website in the chat, so people can take a look at it. But yeah, but please click the link. The ones that are watching live stream, and again, the ones that are watching live stream, you can join X Spaces to do the Q&A. And I'll send a link in the description in the chat box for the ones that don't know my X Spaces channel. But John,
Yeah, and one more thing I would say is I am working on a new Hogue Prophecy report for my subscribers, and there's also a way if you look and sample at hogueprophecy.com, the most recent Hogue Prophecy reports, you will find ways there to become a subscriber, and that would really help this work continue. This next bulletin is 3 very juicy, chock full articles that will look at some positive things, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, and hopefully have questions and answers about it coming. There are some positive potentials coming in the future, surprises. So just check that out on my website, HOGUEPROPHECY.com, HogueProphecy.com. And I'd love to see you join.
okay. So a lot has happened in the news. I don't know if you want to cover what's going on in
Oh,
LA.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so take it
Got
away.
my head spinning.
I mean, you're from California, right? You
Oh
were,
yes, yes, I know Pacific Palisades well. The whole situation is happening here reminds me of, and I write in one of the articles about it. My opening article is about the fire, and all kinds of things came out of that article, very surprising things. Kind of a lot like it's kind of in print, a lot like what we do every other Sunday. It just takes a journey, and we see where it goes. But yeah, I it reminded me. You see, back in the mid '70s, when I was still in an operatic career, I I did something where we had a fund from the LA school district, and Irene Chapman, who's the wife of Bill Chapman, my mentor, lead baritone of the New York City Opera at the time. I played the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood, an opera that was for kids. And it had a lot back then, I was really good at slapstick and falling off the stage and doing all these things and not killing myself. Um, and of course, I was in my 20s, so I could do that. And so Little Red was played by Irene, um, and would have I think 6 performances where 2 grades, like kindergarten first, second and third, fourth and fifth, and then all the way up to 6th grade. And we did this in all the poverty areas, the inner cities of LA, South Central LA, East LA, all that area. And our little troupe literally played in every school. And what was amazing about it was how beautiful the kids were, uh, how innocent it's all started. I would be there and I had a wolf's head on with ears and all, and some of the kids would call out to Little Red, "There, Red, look out! There's the big bear! Don't let the big bear get you." And but then as it went on to later and later classes, by the time we were doing the show to 6th graders, it felt like it felt like we might get killed by a gang. It was just sad to see how the children who were innocent in the ghetto and all of that, they ended up by the 6th grade. It was like they'd all changed. So it was a cross section of how people are conditioned by their circumstances to become something that is not their full potential. So it had a tragic side to it as well as giving a lot of joy to the kids. And um, I talk about that because when the LA riots happened in 1992, I was watching all kinds of places that I knew, shops that I'd gone into, restaurants and other things that I'd gone into, all going up in flames in the riots. And it sort of had an echo to growing up the first 25 years of my life, 27 years of my life in Los Angeles, and of course, Pacific Palisade, Pasadena, all those areas I know very well. And just to see it all going up, all the landmarks and things, it was just such an impact. And also, unfortunately, such a fulfillment of the things I've been talking about and watching for 50 years about the coming of climate change. I mean, I've been doing it since I had an epiphany that this was really happening, that this future was happening it was in 1973 when I was a junior in high school, Rolling Hills High School. I started to understand that this was a future we were going to face. And a lot of the people who were activists were either in diapers or just a twinkle in their parents' eyes when I was starting to get involved with it. So um, it these kinds of wins that hit were unprecedented, and it is. I talk a lot about how the in all ways the atmosphere is being sped up by, strangely enough, by the pumping of much more moisture, which is fuel for an atmosphere that's caused by evaporation from the oceans, from the effect of the solar heat of the sun being blocked by the pollutants that we put up in the air, and some of them are CO2, but methane is even worse in keeping trapping the heat from going out in space. And I've watched the world change in my entire life. Now I'm entered my 70th year, the first few months of it, um, and I've seen things change. And I've seen many Santa Ana winds and I watched many fires, even fires in Palos Verdes where I lived. I mean, it is true. Southern California, up here in the Pacific Northwest where I live, you can't avoid the rain. But this is rain country, but LA is fire country. And it's become more so. All the times in the 1980s and 90s when I made many flights back to LA to work in West LA and Burbank and do many of the shows you've seen me on for History Channel, Discovery Channel, and then I'd fly in for 3 days, do the show, and fly back to Seattle. I don't know how many times I've flown over the same Santa Monica and San Bernardino mountains and seen the swaths of burned out areas increase and increase over the last 30 years. And then we had the situation where there was an incredible amount of rain last year in California, not only rain, but tornadoes in the LA basin. They had a tornado watch. A tropical storm actually hit. That happened one time, a tropical depression when I was living in San Pedro when that happened. But now it's happening with the huge floods that have fueled great growth in all the wilderness areas that are all overbuilt into by people just building right into those same fire vulnerable mountains. And just like what is happening in one of the canyons even today after the initial big fires with the 70-mile, 80-mile-an-hour gusts. Um, I mean, I also used to be a bush fireman, by the way. When I was in Rajneeshpuram in the Oregon Commune in the beginning into the mid of the 1980s, um, we had 64,000 acres, and we had to establish a volunteer bush fireman group, and I was a member of it. So I fought for brush fires there. So I have some experience of firefighting, and I have my neighbor where I live here. Had been a firefighter for structures and wood structures and in cities and all for years. And we were having a talk the other day about it's just never seen anything like this in our experiences of fighting fires in the bush and in the cities. It and that what I hope this will do, as I've long said, everything, if the art of life is being alchemical with it, it's you can be crushed by it and fall on the floor crying. And even that, if you reach a helpless state in a situation, can be a moment of alchemy when you face your helplessness and rather than to avoid it and accept it. And then things change. So even that, nothing that happens to us cannot be an opportunity to turn its base metal badness into something golden. Facing your fears makes you courageous. Um, Getting in touch with your victimhood makes you stand up against it. This, as I'm understanding more and more as I live this very eventful life that I've had lived and are living, is that, and am living, is that there are, there, everything, everything's an opportunity for enlightenment. Everything is an opportunity to be transformed. And what I hope will happen from this is people have to understand. I've tried for years to argue with people who deny these things are approaching. But back in 2017, when I was doing a live show with George Noory that we did in the Everett Opera House, just across from my island, the Pacific Northwest, Whidbey Island. It's just a 15-minute ferry ride away from me. I did about four of those in each year. We started with that, and it was an interesting situation. I was down in the green room where you wait to get on stage. I was the closing act. There were three guests, and I was going to be the closing act. And so I had chance to sit there and listen on the intercom what was going on stage. And this person that was there was very much a climate change denier. And So at one point, George did an interesting question. He said, "Well, let's see what the audience thinks about global warming. How many of you out in the audience believe that global warming is real?" Clap, make an applause. And there was about a quarter of the thousand people that kind of. And then he said, "How many of you think it's all a hoax?" And there was three-quarters making a very rousing applause. So I took that in and just take note of it. And as I do a lot of things, I don't react. I take note of it and then see what happens. When I was on there, there seemed to be an opportunity in one moment. I just said to all these people, I want to try another poll about climate change because it is coming. But I want to try this poll again, if you permit me. I want all of you who believe that climate change is real, or no, that climate change is a hoax, raise both your arms up in the air. So three-quarters raised both of their arms up in the air. Then I said, how many of you, this was 2017, how many of you 11 years now in the year 2028 will realize that climate change has changed your life forever? Raise your arms. It was one of those moments where it triggered kind of what I wanted it to trigger. I mean, people were mechanically raising their arms, and then suddenly I said this stuff about that, and so everybody's kind of like that. It kind of threw them out of gear, and some were kind of huffed about it, some were laughing, and then I said, "Remember this night. Remember what I've said, because in the next 11 years." You're going to see your lives impacted by this climate change that people think isn't there on the one hand, and I would add from further times that happened since. And then there are the green meanies on the other side who are absolutely, as far as maturity is concerned and intelligence, not equipped to be preaching down at all of you. These are the people that think they can save the world's climate with windmills and electric cars, and that, in either case are often powered by fossil fuel, that we will have a carbon zero society. Well, the whole existence, we are carbon. If you mean you're going to be a carbon zero society, then get rid of yourself because you are carbon. You are. So, and this idea of zero carbon, there's always been carbon. What has happened is it's the issue is not about carbon. It's the issue is about it getting into the atmosphere more than had been normal before the Industrial Revolution began. All of these things that have been happening, warming the earth, have started with the Industrial Revolution. But in the last 30 years, since the 80s, two-thirds of all the carbon that we've put into the atmosphere has been put in the last 30 years. So, it's like when these people say, oh, we can, there are a lot of people in the greeny me side that think that the way to solve the world's problem with carbon and climate change is to destroy beautiful works of art with tomato sauce. And this is pathetic. This is infantile. And it makes people angry, not in the way a Gandhian made people angry with civil disobedience. This is just civil stupidity. This is just hooliganism. Gandhi did things non-violently. They would just sit there. They wouldn't do anything. Now, but there was a reason. They weren't just there. It had organization. It had a message. And it was done to, when the British were ruling India, the idea was to a passive aggression, just don't comply. But that was a different situation in climate change. You can't stop people on the road and get traffic jams and block roads and think that they're going to join the climate change bandwagon. They won't. These people who are doing this are actually delaying a real civil and intelligent debate about what is going down in the world. So I'm hopeful that, and these fires aren't over. Tomorrow is going to be another high wind warning, and it's lasting now through Wednesday. And it may not be the last. I mean, people are becoming aware that California, since April of last year, has not had any measurably good rains. And as someone who lived a quarter century in California, my favorite months, because I missed green growing up there, the Golden State is actually dried out weeds and stuff that makes it look golden. And it's only green in January and February. And by March, it starts to fade into gold again or dried out because that's California. But there was always rain in January and February and March, and I loved it because I love rain. You, it's like, I guess if you're an Englishman growing in a rainy country, you end up loving to the deserts. I grew up in a semi-arid desert climate, and I yearned for wet rain and cool air that I could breathe without smog in it. And so I guess that's where I went with that. But the so what happened this year is that all the great rains that happened in California suddenly stopped and plunged immediately into a drought, deep drought. I mean, I never knew a January without a lot of measurable rain. I mean, most of the rain that LA gets is 17 inches. Now, where I live here in Whidbey Island, the South End, we get 35 to 40 inches. Uh, and it's green all year round, like Ireland. Um, this rain hasn't come. And there's no long-term forecasts for the rest of this month into February that see it changing. It may be that these Santa Ana winds, which I know very well, they're hot, they're dry, and they are not stopping. So we're probably not going to see an 80-mile-an-hour wind, but I disagree with the scientists say, oh, don't worry, that's just a once in a lifetime thing. Look, there's been a lot of things in this last 100 years that everybody says a once in a lifetime. The 500-year drought, the 100-year flood. But I'm here to remind people the way to mark the climate changing is how many 100-year floods you start to get in the same decade, and then you double it in the next decade. That's that's an indicator that there's something wrong. I mean, I'll talk about the Pacific Northwest. When I finally put my roots down here in 1986, I remember when summers up here used to have in a 10-day period a nice soft rain, summer rain, with a changeable day of some showers, and then the rest of the week was dry. Um, that doesn't happen anymore. I remember windstorms in November through February that used to, on average, only last 45 minutes or an hour and 45 minutes. Now they last 12 hours. Now they last 24 hours. I remember Santa Anas that did the same. But here we have this Santa Ana that for 3, 4, 5 days was relentless. That's an indicating that the atmosphere, we are doing things to the atmosphere that is making it more dynamic than it was since 10,000 BC when we entered into this interglacial period of mellifluous, balanced, softer weather, which is the very reason why we're not still running around in animal skins with clubs. It gave us a climate where we could create a sedentary, a civilization. No longer were we hunter-gatherers running around chasing after mammoths. Uh, we started to cultivate. We started to tame the wolf, and he became the dog. We started to tame the wild horse, and he became our ride to the different villages. People then were creating wealth. They were staying put. They were harvesting. They had a wealth process, a cornucopia of things going on, and that is what created property. It has its bad side in a way because that's why marriage became an act of property where women were the property of the men, because the idea was when cavemen were doing their caveman thing, they didn't the whole tribe was your family, so it didn't matter who was your mother or father. Everybody was your aunt and uncle. That all changed. So property created marriage, marriage created a contract on love. And I mean, they could have tried a different way, but that's where it went. But it also created wealth, and that required a bartering system. It created economy. And but we couldn't have done that in the world that we're creating right now. We're creating a world where this civilization cannot sustain itself. And so I reached a point where it dawned on me that my argument should be as simple as possible and not try to argue the science with people who really don't care until it really hits home, like in Pacific Palisades, like in the Pasadena area. When it hits home, when you have no home suddenly, and all your works and all your things are gone to ashes as if it was Hiroshima that had hit Pacific Palisades, a nuclear. It's interesting to see how nobody wants to use that term. Everybody's saying it looks like war. But if they asked me, I would say, no, this looks like nuclear war. There's nothing left. It's all burnt. It was so hot that it burned everything except the densest metals. Whole houses with all the things in them are gone and blown away like ash. That's like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, folks, without the radiation. In a time where we are kind of dabbling and tarrying very close to having the real nuclear war. So, so that's these things are scary, but these things are teaching moments. Why do we build into those wildernesses that burn? Well, it's nature, we're back to nature, but how long do you think this kind of behavior is going to allow insurance companies to survive? One of the most important resources I've had over these last 50 years of studying what's really going down is a industry that lives or dies by telling the truth about facts of life. In insurance industries do this because they have to, otherwise they can't really gauge what it will cost the customer to buy an insurance for fire insurance, earthquake insurance, life insurance unless they have solid facts. It's and so the two groups that I've been watching and studying since the 1980s are Munich Re, RE, and Swiss Re, RE. That's what Re means. Um, these are the core observers of things that are going on. And I can tell you, before most people were even talking about climate change, they were already writing about it because they knew they'd have to write insurance policies for it. And they were already saying in the 80s that if this keeps going, that we're the canary in the coal mine of economies. When the insurance companies are overwhelmed and cannot pay for people rebuilding and rebuilding in the same place and getting burned down, This is something I predicted decades ago. I call it serial disasters. The era of serial disasters has begun in this new 2020s decade. It's where you have a big hurricane hit, and then there seems like everybody rebuilds, and it doesn't happen again for 15, 20, 30 years. Well, the time window between the disaster and the rebuilding is narrowing and narrowing because the hurricanes are getting bigger, larger, more windy, more flood prone, and the population is moving more and more in its wake to the places where the beach is nice and all of that. But um, these hurricanes are coming faster. Over the last 20, 30 years, the period of respite between having to rebuild and enjoy where you are is shrinking. And you look at it in Puerto Rico, that's a good example. Since 2018, when the big Category 5 hurricanes started hitting, Puerto Rico has never gotten their power grid back up really to it's always falling apart and falling apart since the shock of Hurricane Maria. It's never really recovered, and it doesn't have enough money and insurance to rebuild it. So if this keeps going, Florida, the Gulf states, the Atlantic seaboard could end up having so many hurricanes that insurance can't afford you building in Cape Hatteras or in Miami or even New York City, even Chesapeake Bay, even New Orleans. It's we can't afford it. So there will be a depression of global warming in a way that people will have to leave these areas. Now, this is all, it's quite I never know what I'm saying in these interviews or these talks, but this is just what's coming. And this fire situation in Los Angeles is a big wake-up call. It's also a big wake-up call politically because what's also coming out, and I'm writing about it in this article about it, is to what extent wokeism has has undermined the water management, has undermined the fire departments, um, and money has been given by Mayor Bass, who she left Los Angeles, the mayor of Los Angeles. The Pacific Palisades is a borough of Los Angeles, one of the westernmost. She went to Ghana on a vacation when the high wind warnings were going to be something historic. She decided to hop in a plane and go there on a vacation, uh, and was not around when all this happened. And when she came back, she faced people. She couldn't even get out of the plane without being confronted by people saying, "Why? You've had 11-hour flight to figure out what you're going to say to the people of Los Angeles. What are you going to say to them? You've had 11 hours to think about it." And all she did was she was, as somebody said, I think it was Clayton Morris on Redacted, said that she looked, or Natalie Morris, she looked like she was like floating out of her body or something like that, that she just was like going, just a non-entity about it. You have people in for decades now. The LA Fire Department has put more attention to what your skin color is than whether you are actually of physical nature to fight a fire. There's one Corolla. He's a guy who he used to do the man show, and he's a funny comic, but also a social commentator. And he told a story the other day, and he's also evacuated from Malibu, and he doesn't know if his apartment has survived or not. So he's doing his show in a hotel room. Um, And I think Ray Corolla, I think is his name. Forgive me if I've forgotten his name. But anyway, the point he was making was very interesting. He was saying, I just come out of my mother was on welfare. You know, we were down and out, and I needed a job after high school. So I thought, well, I wanted to be a fireman. You know, I was a football player. I had a big body. I could do something. I could carry people and do the things that firemen have to do. And I know because I also had to train and do that. We also trained in interior structures as well and got all suited up and did that. And you got to have the strength to do that. It takes big, strong guys. And so he went to the office and they said, well, thanks for wanting to be in the fire department, but according to our new equity laws, you can't be a fireman right now in our quota. Well, why? I've got the body, I got the smarts. Like, no, you're white. We have to have black people and women too to do the job. And so you're going to have to wait 7 years before we get back to this again. So he's right. So he went back 7 years later, and he's in line with a bunch of people who are applying. And he just got to talking with people and all. And there was this little black woman that was 5 feet. He said, you know, it's just very about 106 pounds. And I said, so are you here to become a fire person? And she said, yes, I'm signing up for it. Wow. Wow. How long did they ask you to wait? I mean, I had to wait 7 years. Oh, just 2 weeks. So there's problems in the structure of the Los Angeles government. You know, people don't understand that when you identify with the person's skin color, whoever that person is, don't you know that that makes you a racist? I mean, if you cannot see the soul, if you cannot see the person, if all that is more important is what you look like, what your skin color is, isn't that the reverse of what white supremacists did with black people, where these people, because they were black, were turned into something else? And is it any right to, I mean, this man literally was told he couldn't be a fireman because his skin was white, not because he could do the job. I mean, the point should be if you can do the job. And it doesn't matter if you're black or white or Asian or red or any of those things. And then, you know, the other thing too, that I just give you an example of something that I gotta find a certain thing here for this. Yes. So when you all look at me, what do you see? Am I a white man? Most of you would see that I am a white man. Well, you're colorblind. This is white. Do I look like I'm a white man? I'm a man of many colors. Look at all the colors. There's a little bit of sallow. My face is a little flushed at the moment. I've got yellow here, and there's some blue parts here, and some red, and then this is a little bit amber and stuff. I'm not white. And anybody who thinks you're white, this is you. You're not white. This is mental projections. This is projections of the mind. Now, if I were black, are you this black? Are any African Americans watching this? Are you this black? Are you as black as this right here? No. Even the people of Africa that are really dark, they are blue, they have indigo, they have purples in them. You have ebony, you have different colors of the earth, people of the earth. You're not merely black any more than I'm merely white. This is all mine, F-U-C-K-ing. You know, this is just a big mine, F-U-C-K. And such uh, effing situations like this are the core of cities going up in flames, of equity being more important on your skin color and social thing, sending money, millions of dollars out of the fire department when it needs more attention than ever in these days, and putting it to equity programs like, appreciation of gender changes, or helping all the people that have millions that have come in illegally into this country who have no jobs, and now they have to have social problems and uh, uh, projects and get tents and all that. So it's kind of odd. The money goes into getting tents for people who are on the streets. It's not going in to help them get off fentanyl or other things. And what has happened? While you've given tents to perpetuate a situation on the streets of Los Angeles, you've just made 30, 40,000 more people homeless in in the Pasadena area, in Altadena, in Pacific Palisades. And by the way, yes, there's rich people in Pacific Palisades, but if you've been watching and know the place like I do, there's also working class people, a lot of working class people, middle class people who've lived there. And more than there are the superstars and the actors who can just rebuild and rebuild. I, so this it kind of reminds me of wokeism reminds me of what happened in Mao's China, where he had these. I mean, he was incredibly woke. He was woke in a communistic way. He had this cultural revolution where he just thought if we just break down all the barriers and anybody who's learned, we would put a dunce cap on them, our professors, and beat them and all that. Well, it nearly destroyed Mao's experiment, nearly destroyed China and killed 30 million people. Um, I hope we don't have a repeat of Mao's Cultural Revolution in the woke situation. I don't think actually it's going to happen because a little interesting thing happened on the 5th of November where a lot of that whole momentum of this that was placed in first in Joe Biden and then when he was overthrown by Barack Obama and in a palace coup, then Kamala Harris, who was always Obama's vehicle for what he wanted to do as running a third term from behind the scenes, stepped up. And unfortunately for her, given that she has more trines in her chart than I've ever seen before, I've mentioned that before, it is really the phenomenon that if everything is easy, you don't earn whatever you are easily rising to attain. And I am, for her sake, glad for her that she did not discover the big mistake she had made by becoming president. I think she wouldn't have emotionally stood it. I think it would have caused her a breakdown because she was not ready. She had not earned that job by experience, by knowledge, by ups and downs. It was wrong for Willie Brown, the big party boss of San Francisco, to open all the doors for her like he did, helping her eventually to become an attorney general, which she really wasn't ready to be. She hardly could pass the bar as a lawyer. So now you're going to be the lawyer of the state. This is what's happened. A lot of people have been picked, and it's as much the voters of California's fault. They've got to understand that it's not about your skin color. It's about how to keep your houses from being burned down. And so a lot of these things are happening because, as I said earlier, this year is going to be a year of surprises. Big surprises happened in Los Angeles, and I have a feeling it will have reverberations into the future of the way Californians choose to stop destroying their state for the last decade or two and stop seeing a great exodus of Californians leaving by the millions from their state, but to uh, try to find a balance between the extreme right and the extreme left. The extreme left is just as much a mess to get into, which California is in, as the extreme right is. Find balance. Find balance. If you live in extremes, you're always falling off the tightrope and breaking your neck. The real political dynamism is when you are the rope walker with the bar, where you are walking. If you think of it, people say, well, how boring. He's just hardly moving. He's just slowly walking across a rope. So what? What is that about? I'd rather be right or left of this guy. Yeah, well, you'd be down on the floor broken. And if you had ever balanced on a rope, which is like being in the middle is not blasé. The middle is dynamic. If you truly live in the middle way, it's dynamic. It doesn't look like you're doing much because at every moment your attention is full to this moment and you cannot be tense. You will fall off. So your attention has to be as relaxed as it is total. And then you're just simply making infinite little adjustments. Each one keeps you alive on that rope and not falling off. And so you walk, you gain a grace, and this is a metaphor that can be a way to live life in this middle way, neither this nor that, neither Republican or Democrat, but the dynamism of having to adjust to new challenges every moment rather than being stuck in a dogma politically of this way or that way, because that's the easy and the lazy way, and it always leads to grief. A great tightrope walker never falls.
You want to take a question?
Yes.
Okay, so we have three questions here. So I'm going to start with the in the order that they came in. So in dealing with the drought in California, how much of this do you think that may be part of geoengineering?
Well, it is a part of it. The California is a semi-arid climate. I mean, people used to call it Mediterranean climate when I was a boy in the late 50s, early 60s, but I watched it turn semi-arid in my lifetime, just like Greece has, when it also is beset by more fires than ever before. It's fragile. So geoengineering, if how Paul, how do you define what geoengineering is?
Well, I took it two different ways. One is either some sort of HARP weapon system, or
Uh,
or man changing the landscape in such a way and
yes.
diverting resources.
So that's how I see it. Uh, I'm sorry, everybody. I'll always tell it straight to you, and I don't tell this lightly. HARP is a whole lot of harping about nothing. So is chemtrails. I once made George Noory very mad in a public show when I said this, but uh, when you're looking up in the sky, what you see, some days there's lots of contrails. Most people who are into chemtrails don't even know what a contrail means. I mean, it is kind of fundamental to first learn what it means. It's water vapor. And why do you see lots of contrails sometimes and then not so many, or contrails that are there but they disappear? It's because the humidity in the upper atmosphere changes like it does in the lower atmosphere. Now, what is a contrail made of? It's made of condensed moisture caused by the heat of jet engines or the heat of rotary engines, like you saw in the great contrails of the thousand bomber raids on Berlin. It's heat making water vapor turn into mist. And sometimes, yes, it will in the high winds of the in the high winds, it'll blow a contrail wide like it's a giant feather. It's nothing new. It's just that people, because they've been so lost in their phones and lost in their TVs and stuff, they haven't. I never, almost ever see anybody look up in the sky every day. I mean, I've even made people feel odd because I'm looking up. I take a look at the sky as much as and not just a little to see what the weather's doing, but really look, really see what's up there. Most people are just like this, just, just, just in their phones. And before there were phones, they were just without the phones doing that. I mean, not looking at anything that's going on around them, but just lost in their minds, their thoughts, their desires, their fears, and unaware that they're lost. So geoengineering, so um, if you had put any chemical into a jet engine, because it would have to come through to be that trail, the heat of a jet engine would neutralize any effect of spraying something into the atmosphere. This is so fundamental. Now, certainly there are cloud seeders, but they don't go through jet engines, and you won't see the contrails. They seed clouds with little rocket attachments on the wings in rows on either wing, and then they put it out that way. They don't pump it into the jets. Oh, what a terrible loss of learning and letters will our times be. Oh, Nostradamus said that. Oh, what a loss in learning and of letters of that distant time. We have become we have become technologically advanced at the cost of being social retards.
Yeah, just to interject, one of the funniest things I've ever heard Christopher Hitchens say to Hannity was they had this big debate. I forgot what the debate exactly was about. And Hitchens reverberated to Hannity, "You're so unlettered." and Hannity just had a fit on the show.
Well, it's good to know Christopher Hitchens also flustered him. I flustered him
Yeah.
in the time I did a show with him. I mean, I don't know. I probably said the story before. Maybe other new people haven't known, but it was the final day of 1999, January 31st. I was in Seattle at the Como station to do a satellite link to Sean Hannity and the Hannity and Colmes show, and so I'm in the room. It's just the camera staring at me with the red light getting ready to go on. And then I'm all over the United States and New York and all that area. So I'm sitting there and I've got the nice little picturesque shot from Queen Anne Hill of the Space Needle and downtown Seattle and Rainier off in the distance. And then I was thinking, how many famous behinds have warmed this seat? And then I was told that Ron Reagan's son had just warmed that seat before me. So 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 I'm sitting in that very warmed, important person's chair. And so I'm hearing in my ear, the mic is bud is in my ear, and I'm hearing, okay, Mr. Hogue, we're about to go on. And then there's Sean Hannity and is doing his thing. And we were going to debate climate change and things that are going on in the future. And so they had this rather staid scientist there, and then they had me, and I thought the scientist was going to go after me, but we ended up having a really intelligent conversation back and forth about the problems of global warming. This is like 25 years, a quarter century ago. And and I could feel Sean was kind of being left out. He was like he didn't know where to come in. And so I made a statement about a book that I had written the year before and published in 1998. And I said, well, one of my concerns are, and I wrote it down, my prediction is that in the first 5 hurricane seasons, the first 5 years of the 21st century, either Miami or New Orleans would suffer a devastating destruction. And it'd be one of the first super hurricanes of a globally warmed world. Well, Hurricane Katrina so happens in the fifth season of the 21st century hurricane seasons of North Atlantic was visited dreadfully by visited New Orleans. As we all know, it was flooded and almost destroyed. Now, we didn't know that then. I didn't know that. I'm not, I don't know if it'll happen or not. It just is a message. It's a potential. So anyway, it pushed his button. Sean said, Well, Mr. Hogue, aren't you just a doomsayer? Aren't you just always trying to scare people? And then I very consciously did something you never do on television. My answer was no. The silence. No, he's like trying to pick it up. But I mean, you say this and that, and then I interrupted him and said, "Have you read my book?" And he went, "Well, I said, well, those people who have read my book, the 1,000 for 2,000 startling predictions for the new millennium, they would know that I have 500 predictions from people who are all doom and gloom, the doomsdayers. And then many of the same prophets appear in the second half of the book are the bloomsday sayers. So even that, when you see prophets of different traditions of the world taking both sides as potentials, they're telling us what? They're telling us that we can change things, that prophecy is giving you possibilities of where you're going now. And if you don't want to start World War III or have the world heat up, you will do things now while there's time to avoid those disasters. And he kind of went, well, I mean, yeah, I did read the a couple prophecies from the end of your book, and yeah, they were positive. And okay, let's go to commercial.
Right, right, exactly. Let me.
So
Oh,
no,
all right.
no, so not it's almost done yet. Here, got this. So I'm unplugging. Everything's it's all done. I'm getting ready to go, and suddenly the phone, which is from the directly from the producers in New York, starts ringing. And I pick it up and I say, hello. And I hear Sean in the distance, like nothing happened, is doing his next segment. And the producer's woman is whispering to me, saying, Mr. Hogue, I just want you to know, and all of us in the crew want you to know that it's rare for Sean Hannity to be flustered like you did him. He never gets flustered. And we want to tell you this because, frankly, we think he's an SOB. Now, why would they be so hostile to him? I've always wondered until I realized most people that work in the arts and the news as the nuts and bolts that make it happen, they're usually more liberal people. So all of Fox is crewed by cameramen, editors, and people like that. The anchors are right wing, but everybody else is an unemployed Democrat who needs a job. And that's really what happened in Fox a lot. So now go ahead.
No, I think you're right about that. I think that's even true over at Bloomberg. I think there are some of the anchors are probably a little bit more aligned with Reagan economic kind of policies,
Mhm.
while you have behind the staff, the crew that are probably much more liberal.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I agree with that.
yeah. I mean, I discovered it. It was quite amazing. In fact, they even did a thing about Roger Ailes' conspiracy, the thing that happened when he had that scandal with the anchor who has since gone on and done really great things on her own. I was even watching her today, but I can't remember her name. And she's doing great. I'm glad for her. But they actually talked about it in the show
Is
as far
that
as
is that
Mhm.
Kelly? Is
Yeah,
that
Megan Kelly. Yes, Megan Kelly.
I
And
was at an event where her husband was actually speaking. He's a
mm,
writer, so he
mm,
was promoting his book, and it was an interesting book. It's like it's a thriller where he kind of uses fiction to try to explain this. I think it was the sinking of the Titanic,
mm.
and and the conspiracy theories and all this. It was
Yeah.
an interesting lecture that he did, but she really thinks she's hot stuff when she walks in the whole. We were late by like about the event didn't start on time because she wasn't there.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and it's just
I'm an opera singer formerly. That's called being a prima donna.
yeah. Well, I mean, she's a prima donna, that's for
Yeah.
sure. But
She's a good one. It's like an opera had, Callis. Callis was one of the greatest opera singers in the world, but she was a raving prima donna. But my God, she could sing and
no,
act.
the thing that this was at the Harvard Club, so it's a conservative place,
Mm.
right? And, in the crowd, it was packed room in the large hall, hundreds of people there. And she had this mini skirt that was that was a leather mini skirt. She wasn't
Oh,
dressed appropriately for a conservative place at all. On top of being late 10 minutes, I, she's something else. I
what
don't know.
year was that?
This would have been last year. This was last
Oh,
year with her.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
I was about to say, I was about to hope to say that maybe she's matured since then, because it
No,
seems
no, no,
like
no, no.
on
She
her
already
in
had
her
her podcast
shows,
set up.
you know,
No,
the
she
way
already
she
had.
does her shows, I really like the way she does her shows. But okay, so she's
No,
got she's really a prima donna, huh?
no, and I,
If I'm ever on our show, maybe I'll ask her, why did you wear that leather shirt to a conservative?
I would,
What were you trying to, what was the situation you were trying to create?
well, if you watch her podcast,
Yeah.
she is a little scanty with the clothing sometimes. Not all the time, but
I
sometimes.
guess I'm a man. I guess
No, no, no.
I enjoy it.
But yeah, but the thing is that her she's I think she's improved as a podcaster over time.
Mhm.
She's now in a whole different realm where it's
Completely.
more independent.
Mhm.
She does have a small crew that's there's a little bit of production value of what she's doing with the podcasts, but there is this you know, there are probably much worse individuals that would be in the prima donna category than her.
Yeah.
But she was late, and she definitely was not dressed appropriately for the Harvard Club. I mean, you're talking. I mean, you can be a little bit risque, but I mean, literally, I thought she was a whore. I mean, that's the way she
Wow.
dressed,
And it
but
was just
no,
last year.
and it was last year,
What will she do
and
when she doesn't have that body to use as politics?
exactly. It's just that's a good
Like
point
me.
that you're no, that's a good point that you're making. I think that
Can't do that.
she's in shape. I believe she's in her early 50s now,
Wow. She's in
and
great
she's
shape.
looking. I mean, she's looks good for her age. She's in shape, but she realizes she's a blonde, right? And she's educated. She has a law degree. She's smart, but she also knows that she has a shelf life, that if she doesn't play up on what she has,
Yeah.
it's done. It's over. As I think one of the lyrics from Bruce Springsteen in one of his songs, it talks about women as they get older. It's like their car crashes, and they just age, so they have to play up when they're young on their beauty. I'm paraphrasing what he said,
Yeah.
but that's basically kind of the theme of the song. It's talking about that these women, and she's playing that up. You can tell that she's playing, and she's a little bit, it could go way worse. I mean, other women, of her caliber play it up even more. But
Yeah.
I just think that she is playing a little bit of that element of the
She's
physicality.
more subtle about it than most, and I think that's probably what's made her endure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but I do think that she has matured in the process of, leaving Fox and doing the whole independent
Yeah. Oh,
podcast.
yeah. So I didn't really frankly, the way she did that interview with President Putin was like, oh man, don't play the blonde stereotype, you know?
Right. And then she also does these gotcha questions. She tries to do,
Yeah.
I thought when she was doing the presidential debate back
Mm.
in 2016, the
Mm.
famous one with Trump, says that blood was coming out of her eyes and other places.
In other
It
places,
was,
yes.
yeah, it was gotcha questions. She
Well,
wanted to
she
play the
earned it.
gotcha question game. So she tries to play up does the gotcha question type stuff, and then she also does the risk. She does a little bit of the risque physicality to try to get the
Oh,
viewership.
yeah. She knows how to play her sexuality well, and that's, to her advantage in a way, but, you know, I don't know. I shall have to do the gotcha with her and talk about the leather. Skirt that was too short
The
for the
look was
conservative.
too short.
And what were you trying to arouse in them?
All right. So okay. So let's go to the next question. This was the
Okay.
second one that came in. This was typed on the X Spaces feed, and so I'll read it. When do you think that these fires will be contained? This reminds me of another climate catastrophe, the floods that happened in the south of Brazil last year.
Oh
They
yeah.
said it was one of those 100-year events, but it wasn't over in a few days. It kept happening for 2 months.
Yeah.
So, what's your take? When you think,
Well, I mean, the flood in Brazil, the flood in 2010 over a 24-hour period in Pakistan that put the whole Sindh province underwater for months. It turned into a sea with half-drowned villages and 25 million people displaced. And what it did as a counterbalance, that unusual low that suddenly just drenched all that monsoonal rain, a month of monsoonal rain in one day. At the same time, it triggered in Russia 500 major fires in Europe, across European Russia, which destroyed 1/4 of the wheat crop. So bad was the wheat crop diminished that if they continued to export wheat to the Middle East, affordable wheat across the Middle East, Russia's livestock industries would have died from starvation. So Russia had to stop for 9 months exporting wheat and just use it domestically. So I'm going somewhere with this. We have a disaster that impacts Pakistan, that it causes an opposite extreme of too many fires in Russia, that causes a food issue, which requires the 400 million people of the North African and Arab world to seek some other market to buy wheat for their staple bread. So they chose America, which was far more pricey and expensive. So the governments across North Africa, Egypt, Libya, Syria, Iraq all started buying this more expensive wheat, which meant that it was more costly. So costly that you would approach just to have food, spending 40% of what you earn the day in a day. That is what triggered across the Arab world in North Africa the Arab Spring revolutions, which overthrew dictators like Mubarak of Egypt, but it also brought a Salafist extremist as president, which was so bad with the Islamic laws and the Sharia being brought in that the people actually voted for dictatorship again. El-Sisi has been dictator since then. It also caused from a great drought that started on top of the food cost in Syria, and that was used by outside sources to try to overthrow Assad's government. CIA was involved with it, ISIS and the other Salafist people who were leaving Iraq. They also were employed to upset things there, and that civil war has led to 11 years, 600,000 dead, 25 million displaced, millions of people sent to Europe over the borders of Turkey because their refugee camps can't keep them. It also caused the Gaddafi regime to be overthrown in 2011, and that the cost of that was Gaddafi had abandoned being part of the Arab world. He had decided to say, I am African, and I'm going to use the wealth that we're creating here to help advance my brother African nations. Whatever the skin color, I don't care. We are all Africans on this continent. And so he was doing immense help to a lot of the countries that were in need. And then he said, if you depose me, I can predict what will happen. I'm literally the floodgate. If you take me down, tens of millions, Europe is going to be invaded by refugees. And what's happened since then, since 2011? Exactly that. And it's still going on. So I've come a long way from that little monsoon deluge. But consider how the climate's changing is altering we is altering the world politics into more disorder. As the climate gets more disordered, so do we. And of course, everything from 2011 led to today to the complete collapse of Syria as a nation. It is now as a destroyed nation as Libya remains, with all the instability that that might cause in the Middle East. So, what was the thread of the question again?
Well, it was focused on containment of the fires and these
Oh, and
European.
the geophysical alteration was not just it's we have you know if we were a different human race, I and if we really managed our resources right, and we're not spending most of our resources on wasteful things, silly concepts of social change to fascism and communism and capitalism without a balance. Um, if we did not waste so much of our time and energy in these things that always work against us and separate us, we could have a planet with 50 billion people living with food, space, uh, education, everything working, and it wouldn't even be crowded. We we because we are not growing up well with the way we manage things, we we can't even sustain an 8 billion population, let alone 50 billion. So yes, we're changing things. That's why the geologists said, excuse me, had renamed and created in 19 back starting back in 1950 a new great era, geological era, the Andropropocene. I hope I'm saying that right. The age of man, Andros, because we it's an age that they started with 50 because of the recovery from World War II is when really economies and things started to quickly change. The world, you can see even from space how we are changing the world like no other people before us. So this age is the age of man, and if it's going to be a long one, if it's going to be one that began with us and our Anthropocene, we and that name will be forgotten if we don't get this right in the next 50 years. And so it is a vast subject that is going to be in one of my essays for a book that I'm now starting to write, which I've been planning to write for a very long time, called The Book of Things to Come. And it is a book that I'm currently writing it. It takes many of the themes that are of interest to people, from reincarnation to education to politics to war to peace to social work to all these things. I take those subjects, some of them a few centuries into the future, if that's as far as they go, but some of the subjects, like how we evolve with reincarnation, how our relationship changes, will go down 4,000 years of future time. So go ahead.
Yeah, so we have now three more questions. Two of
Okay.
them are going to be through X Spaces call-in. So I'm gonna I just passed the mic to Don if Don wants to jump online here.
Yeah, how you doing?
Hi.
Thanks, Paul. My question, I know one of the things that I have perhaps a problem with is climate change. Obviously, is a complex dynamic system, and it's hard to know what other inputs you put into the system, the long-term effects of it. So what I would say is, like, if you look at the problems that we're seeing is more of an environmental issue we're dealing with, than there are practical engineering solutions to all these problems. What I see the fundamental issue is, and I guess my question to you is, when you look at the state of the world, and you might say the endless wars for one, Paul's brought up the biological weapons programs, the fact that they have been shut down, the wars creating these migration crises. You have these rogue covert intelligence agencies that are overthrowing governments, that are creating instability. And then perhaps you have an ideological problem in what's being taught in the school systems, and then what's actually translated to the people as to what are the correct first order principles as to how to organize their society that would bring in the most prosperity. And then I'm not even talking about the human trafficking issues, about the children involved in this, and then the repercussions downstream with those children, the families that they have on society. So my question is, if we take a Pareto analysis of this, what are the major issues, if you had to prioritize them, that you would say, if we correct this one, then we have a shot?
The priority is to wake up. And that
I
can
know,
only...
I get that, and I can see.
No, listen.
Okay.
You have not heard me. I have not even begun to say about this. The fundamental atomic thing that can only be done by the individual is to wake up from all the things you stated very clearly and well, and to become aware of how the individual is conditioned to do these things. The simple reason we're here is to remember what we've brought into the birth canal, into this world. We've brought the innocence of Buddha nature. We have brought the Christ consciousness. And the society, and I know a lot of people saying, well, you ask, and so this is the karmic response. You ask, what's the one thing that I would say is the fundamental first priority? The first priority is consciousness, to recover the lost innocence, and the innocence that makes every child naturally a genius, but it never gets a chance because society, rather than draw this out, that's what education means, society dumps its stuff into us and buries that. And this is a education is the next step. This fundamental thing, if we act into the activity of things, of changing things, we have to revolutionize education so that it does what the word means, draws this mystery that witnesses the body and mind that it's visiting the world in, but is not of it. It is about, you can have, and even Einstein understood this to his tragic moments with pulling his weight in his signature to all the other scientists that sent the letter to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president, compelling him to start an atomic weapons program. He said it was the worst mistake he had ever committed in his life, and if he had a chance to be born again, he was a Pisces, he wanted to become a plumber. Now, it is the atomic issue. It's this atom that has to be split. And what has to happen is, if people cannot do things in a healthy, beautiful way if they don't know who they are, if they don't know themselves, if they don't know their subjectivity. The scientists like Einstein were brilliant and theorized and studied many things, but Einstein didn't know his mystery. He just was seeing the outer world. In fact, Einstein, when his wife was one time looking at a beautiful full moon in Switzerland, he said, "Oh, that's so beautiful." "No, it isn't," he said. "It's just a dead rock, and the reflection of the sun on the surface is making that light." He's right. He's right. but he's also missing something. You know, the poetry of life, the love, these things are, it's like if somebody says, I'm going to stay objective, and that's why I'm an expert on love, only because I've never fallen in love, because that is not objective. Well, this is a man who's lost in objective projection. He doesn't know, he is a subjectivity. He's born a subjectivity, he lives a subjectivity, and he dies not knowing that subjectivity. And some of the things that express into the world from that subjectivity is compassion, is love. And so this is the fundamental problem. The human race. So I ask you, and I ask anyone listening, the first thing to do is to go in. Is what I say often at the end of my articles when it feels like I've really gone deep into some big stuff. And then I also say at the end, I call people to learn how to meditate, not the way it is being taught in the West. The West has so impoverished with its meaning for meditation. It means contemplation. It means mindfulness. It's about who is contemplating on what. It's a layer much deeper than that, is what meditation gets closer to. It is not mindfulness. Meditation is no mind fullness. And I have been, so I contend, with a great master who died in, I was sitting meditating over his body as a guard to protect his body as it was burning in the burning ghats of India on the 19th of January, 1990. Osho is my master, and Osho had spoken about many things of the world, science as well as all the traditions of becoming awakened to this subjectivity. That filled 700 books. No one's done that before. And he had his discourse series. He was the first master to understand that all we have from Buddha, all we have from Christ, all we have from all the great founders and people who revolutionized the spiritual rebellion and then had that rebellion turned into an organized religion. All the esoterics who had to see exotericism take and turn them into marble statues to be worshipped. What people need is to return to becoming a seer. Meditation means to be a seer, to be a witness. The term dhyana in Sanskrit means to basically watch, not to contemplate, not to figure out what's wrong, but to watch the figure outer, to watch yourself and the world that constantly moves and changes and rediscover that point in you that is eternity itself. If you reach that point, you are like a wave struggling with all the other waves across the ocean. Completely, the water of the wave is identified with the shape of its waviness. Some waves are big Napoleon waves, some waves are Trump waves, some waves are Biden waves. Some waves are, they have lost the fact that inside them is the oceanic where they came from. And in this society, just like in this metaphorical society of waves, people are rushing and moving and trying to attain things and find things. One of the things that some of the more religious waves are doing is saying, what is this ocean that everybody talks about? I don't know what that is, and I want to find it. I don't know why I want to find it, but I will search wave after wave of reincarnated lives as I rise. I am searching for that ocean, but I don't know where it is. The more I search, the more I feel frustrated that I'll never find it. Well, the reason is you are the ocean. The waves come from it. The waves disappear back into it. So these fundamental foundations need to happen. And what is needed is to find meditation techniques that are not merely watching the breath like Vipassana. That's the last thing to do. I don't know how many times in my readings I've had people come to me and say, well, I was in the mindfulness path, and I just tried so hard. I tried so hard to meditate and make my mind silent that I just gave it up. Well, that's because you weren't really meditating. You weren't merely just watching yourself saying, make my mind, like, why does this mind suddenly become yours when you didn't have one before you were born? Why is it suddenly possessed? Were you a baby sprouting out of your mother's womb saying, you hurt my feelings, I like those feelings? No, that came later. This is a part of the subjective science of meditation, which follows exactly the scientific discipline. But the hypothesis is there in this mind and in this emotions and in this body that's constantly changing, in a world that's constantly changing, where people are running around everywhere, is there something in all of this in me that does not change, that is always there, that even life nor death can touch? That's the hypothesis. And then what you do is you begin to be the scientist who is a mirror reflecting perfectly what is going on before you without judgments for or against. And if the judgments come, you watch those too, because the hypothesis is you can never find or see this source of you because you are the source. So anything you see and experience is an appearance. And there's nothing right or wrong with appearances. The phenomenal world is part of the ocean has not a problem with its play of waves. It loves it. It's play. Sometimes there are storms, sometimes there's the soft, still seas, but the ocean is in this huge creativity of terrible and wonderful things all happening. The wave must remember it's an ocean. And when it remembers that through certain techniques, and I'm even willing, if anybody wants to go to my website and hogueprophecy.com and push the contact button up in the little squares at the top, you'll get an email. And all you have to put into it is meditation in the subject line. And I will give you the leads to what I contend, because I've done them since 1980, are meditations that are tailored for the mind amplified world that we live in, and is just the medicine. Meditation comes from the word medicine, healing. It is just the spiritual healing that is needed, and it can only be given one individual at a time. However, in such a world as this, all the individuals can, with media, be told about how many thousands, how many millions of people are out there right now listening to me talk about this. You are all alone together with me, but I can share with you the techniques, at least that I know, for I only try to do things from my own experience, not from something I borrowed from somebody else. These meditations work. They give you an oceanic perception of love and compassion for the world. You can then see what is wrong with it. More and more people that begin to become seers is exactly what is needed to change the course of the human race. And I must say in closing, it does not need a whole lot of us. There is a story that goes back to 500 BC in the time of Buddha, where there was a decade of peace that was recorded in all the kingdoms of India, and they didn't understand, the Pandits did not understand why it happened. And it only lasted 10 years. It built up and then lasted at its peak for 10 years and then slowly faded away. They finally, after years following it and wars and everything returning, finally the Pandits realized what had happened. That in that 10-year period, 5 great masters, great, great teachers were alive teaching in different parts of India. One was Mahavir. He was the oldest of the Jains. There was Kesha Kambala. There were 2 others. Then the youngest was Buddha. When the decade started was when Buddha was alive with the other 9. And so Buddha and Mahavir were the only 2 of the 5 that their scriptures survived to our times. So we have their black in print messages. In the darkness of print have most great seers left to us this legacy. When Osho talked about that, he said, in my case, I will not let that happen. Because you can read the Dhammapada, you can read Bhagavad Gita, but you can read the statements of Jesus taken down by his disciples. You can read Baal Shem Tov, but where is his dance in those words? Where is the silent pauses? What was the way Buddha drew people with his words, but really he was trying to draw them into his silences? Osho understood that because he is just the same kind of stature of master. And I sat with him for 10 years at his feet. And so he also recorded everything, not just for the people who sat with him, but for you, so that you could see, as a hypothesis, if you see this man in these videos talking, and I have these videos with me when the thing I give out in my emails are how to get the meditations, the music for them, 2 books that are very important to read of Osho that give the instructions to it. And then about how he'll have little 5-minute tapes and discourses. You just watch him. It's not, you're watching me in 2 dimensions. I'm getting my thing across. Watch him in 2 dimensions on a screen. And if you have something that has not been completely buried by your conditioning, you're going to feel there's something more there. And it's worth going all the way into, because a master, Osho said, is a context. That's all. If it happened to him, it can happen to you. It's just like a candle walking in a whole world of candles in the dark. But there's something different about this candle. He looks like me, he acts like me, but what is that on top? His wick is on fire. What's that all about? Well, he says, this is what your wick was meant. Was your very destiny, your birthright, to be a lit candle, not a candle that has no light or doesn't even know what light is. It happens once in a while that a candle discovers this light, and then the context is there before the rest of us. And the candle, if it's a master, will do things to help you come closer and closer by talking, by welcoming, by loving you. And then suddenly your candle is lit. How did it happen? What happened? Nothing happened. It was passed over. The master has given nothing and lost nothing, and you have gained everything. This is my answer to your question. It's an important question. Thank you for it. But put a pause to your mind and go and find something in you that watches the mind. And then when you find that, your mind will then be a servant of it. And it will have genius, and it will be persuasive, and it will help this world. But the first thing, the fundamental thing is you have to wake up. The whole existence, you're the first priority. And that is a message I'm saying to millions right now. So in a paradox, I'm saying it to one person in millions. And I have been doing that for much of my adult life.
All right, so we have another request. I'm sure that Don probably wants to reverberate and ask a further. But Don, just if you don't mind, because I want to spread the love around here. Luke, I'm gonna pass on the mic to you, and then after that, Don can chime in. Luke, you're on. Please ask your question. Hello? You have to unmic, Luke. There you go.
Yes.
There he goes.
Hi, John. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, Luke.
Okay, John. How are you today? Yeah, I'm just calling to, well, I have a question and I want to say something, but for now, the question, I guess. I just wanted to ask, like, the things that you talk about, like the meditation, right? And the self-awareness and everything. I think in the end, it all connects. The point to this thing I'm understanding is all connects to God in the end, or omnipresence, regardless of how we connect and who we are, I guess. But I guess the first thing is, like you're saying, the initiation to connect, to have a empty mind, to try to let everything out and let something positive in. Is that right?
That's the hypothesis. That's a variation of the hypothesis. But it has the quality, it is not the essence. Let me give you an example. What you're saying is true in intellectual context.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, like, oh, I couldn't hear you, sorry.
What you're saying intellectually is absolutely, as far as the intellect can go. To make it a living thing requires different kinds of techniques that take you out of the mind and more into the heart, and then more into something even deeper than the heart. And so, it's for instance, we could all be having a debate about H2O, water, WATER in English, Wasser in German, agua in others, so many languages. And we stop there. We stop in the imagining of it. You're not going to go anywhere if you merely imagine enlightenment. You are enlightenment. And the thing to awaken that requires a lot more than thinking. In fact, it may even require that for a time you put your mind aside and go deeper than it. And these meditations very playfully help a lot of that to happen. I mean, that like I say, if you go to HogueProphecy.com, and for Don's response, my response to your question is do these meditations. Or if you want to have a reading and have a direct one-on-one with me, I'd be glad to give you 3 hours of my time. And you have a brilliant intellect, as you showed before. It is at this moment your greatest virtue, and I would contend it is also your greatest trap. Let it not be a trap anymore. Let it not, in its brilliance, keep you in just the dimension of thinking, because this brain that you have, just like mine, is a transitory thing. Something has to be deeper than our thinking, as brilliant as it can be, because look at all the brilliant people who have thought, and yet they have not fixed this world. So there's got to be something deeper that may use thought is one of its ways to communicate. So I'm not against the intellect. How can I be against or for or against? But I can be identified with it. And that causes all the problems. The problem is identity. Maybe Luke is also identified with the Eastern thought of how things, this is how it all come. We're all part of Brahma. We're all part of the one. What if that is not enough? What if that is a trap? What if it's really about dropping all that and seeing something deeper that watches the mind? So the first step is to watch the mind, to be a seer, to be dhyana, which when it left Sanskrit and Buddha was teaching it, he taught it in Pali. and Pali is called jhana. And then thousands of years later, Bodhidharma went to China and brought that Dharma to China, and it became Chuan. And then it came to Japan, and it became Zen. Zen is probably the closest hints that can be given to something that you can, the part, and all intellect is a part of the whole. And there's nothing right or wrong about that. It just is. The part, the wave cannot express the ocean. He is just a little movement of the movementless eternity that is eternally fresh and always the same in its newness. So there's all kinds of difficult ways that a teacher of this has to do to try to help people through devices, through meditation techniques, to create a climate. Meditations are not the meditation. They are simply a preparation of the room for the guest. You clean the room. You open the windows. It helps you open the windows. You are available, open. Meditation is not a religion. Meditation, whatever your religion definition of yourself, will only become more sensitive. Your atheism even will become more sensitive, more open. Meditation is an opening. It's a rediscovery of your lost innocence. And you've known it. Everybody has lived the throwing out of paradise story by God. It's called 9 months in the womb. That is where all the gardens of Eden began, because you had no mind for 9 months. You had no responsibilities, no burdens. You were just floating in your mother's womb, nourished by her like she was a universe for you. And then something worse than death happened to you. It has happened to all of us. That is why we enter this world crying. Death is not as hard, Osho used to say, as being born. And so you're born. How can you not cry? You're cast out of paradise. You're Adam and Eve, naked, and so there's always in us a memory somewhere of that wonderful moment. And it is not lost, because the womb, Osho used to say, is an infinitesimally small metaphor for something that's even bigger womb than existence itself. And what happens to some of us is that we lose that knowledge, that awareness of it, but if we gain it back, we become full circle back to an innocent child. Only it's not a child anymore. It is innocence with full awareness, full intelligence, full love. And the difference between a child and the sage, Osho told me, was the sage has that quality, infinitely more vast, of being in that womb. Yes, he has to work. He teaches. He eats. He has to make a living. He does all those things like any. He's actually a more ordinary man than any of us, because we in our egos are always looking to be extraordinary, extra this, extra that. The thing that makes this so difficult is not the thing itself, but are looking for it. This thing that I'm talking about is the most ordinary thing in existence. That's why we miss it, because the ordinary is not important to us. Osho used to say that sometimes people, when they said, "I'm so bored in your ashram right now," I said, "Oh, this is precious," he used to say. "It's so good that you're bored. If you're bored, you're so close to it, to enlightenment, that you can't imagine it. Be bored, be deeply bored." There's some meditations with that, because it's just like the crazy wisdom Lama once said, and it rings in my heart ever since I saw it in the commune on a postboard in the Magdalena cafeteria in the Osho commune in 1980s. He said, "Enlightenment is the ultimate disappointment." It is. Because there's no point. Points are used, but they're not the center. There's no point. There's no point in anything. But don't misunderstand why when I say that. If you have no point in it, you can really live anything. You can really celebrate your life. You can help yourself and others. You can give insights that end wars. But you first have to have that insight. Emphasis on in. It's not even important what you're watching, Osho used to say, as long as you are witnessing it. 24/7, these meditations eventually help you not to just waste your life by having 1 hour of being aware and 23 hours of not being aware. That's not going to get you anywhere. You have to get a thread. And in this email that I send out, there's a video where Osho talks about the stages of where first you do sit in a certain kind of clothes, certain kind of time, and then as your centering deepens, you then take it into simple tasks. Walking, sweeping the floor, things. This is what we did in our work, was our meditation in the ashram. And then it gets to where you can even take it into the thread of the awareness into your most complicated work, like playing a piano or doing calculus or doing some scientific theorems or things like that. Here, you're still a watcher. I'm talking to you from that space. I've been sending all these things out, and I am not in control. The I is not doing this. Something deeper than the I is doing it. And you won't drop your I, it'll just be a servant of it. This itness, this isness, this no thingness.
So, Luke, the reason why I was muting your speakers is because of the feedback. So if you wanted to talk, just undo the mic there, and you can talk, because there's a feedback when you're speaking.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, I mean it's okay, but there's a lot of background noise. So when John's talking, just make sure you silence your speaker.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out, because I couldn't hear John so clearly, so I have to hear from there. No, I got it. So, but the other thing I was trying to ask John, so the other thing I was trying to ask was that the part about the meditation, everything, I wanted to switch the topic quickly. So a little bit about astrology. So I spent some time on astrology, and I think that as astrology affects people's mind and programming like a blueprint of the human soul, like it really affects people. I mean, most people don't realize that meditation and other things are important. Yes, but astrology, I feel that people, if they overlook astrology, they miss a lot of the programming that they built and designed as a person, each unique person from the beginning. So if they don't unlock that, I think they lose a lot of themselves. It's very difficult to find yourself when you don't look at your astrological chart. Would that make sense?
Yes, and this is what you think. And I think this is it. That is also true. And I am speaking as a mundane astrologer, a judicial astrologer. I do my predicting in my work in the world using astrology. So it's very true what you say. It can help. But no astrologer has brought enlightenment of the Buddha to anyone. Astrologers commented on Buddha. They looked at his chart, and the astrologer said, oh, well, we can see that he'll either become a monk or he'll become a Chakravartin. He'll become a world conqueror like Alexander the Great. And so the king of Bihar was very interested in that, and he wanted his son to be that. So he asked the astrologer, what do you think we should do to make sure that he doesn't end up a monk? And he said, well, my idea would be and I just add this to the story because it's an insight I have of this Buddha story, is that what you do is you make sure he never sees any death only sees youth, never sees any gray hairs, only has wine, women, and song. Everything's happy, everything's wonderful, and make him a complete hedonist and a prince and all of that. And if you can't keep this going, by a certain time, you're all going to get old. So my guess is that by the age of 30, he will have gotten so attached to the way his life is, then yes, he'll want to become the Chakravartin because it kind of bores him. He's caught the brass ring, and now he wants to do something to change the world, like conquer it. So that's what they did. And up to just a few years before he was 30, he had a day where, of course, you can't keep this up. People make mistakes. So he's in his chariot with a charioteer driving him to the Festival of Youth, of all things. The army had already been ahead, taking all the dead leaves out of the way, so there was nothing dead anywhere around. And he was going through a village, and just by accident, an old man came out of one of the huts. And he was all white and cracked and white beard. And Buddha was shocked. What has happened to that man? And the charioteer was just could not lie to Buddha and said, well, Lord, Prince, um, this man is aging. Well, does that happen to everyone? It happens to everyone. And so he went down a little further, and then there was tinkling bells, and there he saw his first dead man going to the burning ghats. And the chariot driver said, well, what's happened to that man? He's died. Is that going to happen to me? Yes. You will one day go to the same burning ghat and be burned to ashes as if you never lived. Then, a little farther down the road, he saw this man, all in orange robes, who was incredibly peaceful, gliding past him on the road. And he looked at him and he said, what happened to him? And the charioteer said, oh, he is a sannyasin. What is he trying to do? He is trying to find that which can never die. Buddha said, turn the chariot around. I am not going to waste my time going to a festival of youth with what I know now, that their youth is fleeting, that life is fleeting, that all that I have is going to be ashes. Turn around to the palace. So he went back, and that night he left the palace, and for 6 years he did the opposite of being a hedonist. He tortured himself. He became a sadhu, and he tortured himself, and to the point where he was skin and bones, eating one hemp seed a day. And finally, he almost drowned in the little brook next to his Bodhi tree. And he crawled out of that all emaciated and spent, and shook his head and said, a sitar string, if it's too loose, cannot play music. If it's too tight, it will break. And he crawled out, and he sat by the tree, and night was coming. The full moon was out. A woman came by with food and thought that he was a god of the tree. So she handed him the food. And Buddha ate, for the first time in years, a meal. And the other sadhus were around him and said, oh, he has fallen. He has fallen. And they left him alone. He has lost it. Then Buddha allowed himself, after eating, he felt sleepy. He allowed himself to sleep for the first time in years. He woke up with the dawn, looking at the morning star, and when it disappeared, he disappeared. He passed into nirvana, which means to blow out the candle. He was gone, but there was a body, there was a mind, there was a heart beating. The Buddha was there, but there was no Siddhartha anymore. Prince Siddhartha had disappeared, but something had replaced him, as if the whole sky was inside of him. And he saw in his enlightenment that the whole world was enlightened with him. One of the key things to learn in the human race is however the world looks to you, you are projecting yourself upon it. If you see the world as horror and hell, your ego is projecting that upon it. If you become enlightened, you reflect what you are, and the existence reflects it back to you.
So someone that's on X Spaces, his name's Sir MPC. He wrote a question. I'm not sure if he wants to just request the mic and ask the question, but I'll start off with what he typed in the feed here. Trudeau is resigning, as you know. He resigned. So I don't know about how the actual parliamentary system works in Canada. If the parliament picks the next president or prime minister, or whatever it is, or what, but it seems like there's going to be an election in October of 2025. So this
He'll
year.
be a caretaker until then. He'll be caretaker prime minister until then.
Okay, so the question that he had, it looks like he asks is that what is the political path forward, and it kind of dovetails into I think Freelander and Carney are front runners to replace Trudeau. So I don't really follow the Canadian politics too much. Maybe you can interject here.
I wonder when the globalists will wake up, maybe never, to the fact that a revolving door of the same kind of mess is going to, not for much longer, be tolerated by the people of Canada, the people of Germany, the people of France, and the people of Poland and other places where this kind of globalist stooges of the globalist movement end up being their leaders. The question I would have is, what can the Conservative Party give? What can the Conservatives do in Canada and Ottawa to be an alternative to that and not follow the same bad habits that they tend to follow, as we have here in the United States? This is a year of revolution. This is a period opening in astrology, opening on the collective level, where for the next 4 or 5 years it'll build and grow, where people won't know why on the collective level, but they just don't want the same old thing anymore. And there will be a short period of time where they're willing to risk very different, fresh, and open ways. I already see it happening. The big trauma that happened in 2016 for Democrats when Trump was elected hasn't happened. I'm seeing even Mr. Zuckerberg is of Faceplant is even opening himself to dropping his censors. Something has changed with this election, and something in the strange vehicle of a very strange but surprising man, Donald S. Trump, is going to be a catalyst for a lot of change. I mean, the German party is going down. There is a lot of people moving to AfD to be the next party. They're being called a lot of nasty names by the left, not because it's a fact. They're not fascists. The problem is that the people blaming those things deep down are more like Marxists. So it's projection, and it's possible. It's possible that AfD will win. And if they try to censor them, that will start revolution in the streets. Europe has suffered a different degree, like Canada has suffered this overtaking by a technocratic dictatorship in Brussels. They voted them in, but now they basically in a political sense only, think that they're an aristocracy that can rule over the people of Europe. Well, people are getting fed up in Europe about that. If you want to know more about it, just read my Hogue Prophecy reports and become a subscriber. There's hopefully peaceful. I don't see blood in the streets and things like that, but I do see millions of people surrounding their capitals and say, stop this. But then in the, revolutionary times always end up be more often than not, a revolution starts as a revolution to revolve, to change, to turn over, but it then ends up a react illusion. From revolution to react illusion. And it then just replaces one bunch of idiots with another. The Tsar is taken over, and then the Bolsheviks are the new idiots that are running the show. The American Revolution was unique in that because of our geographic location, not threatened by nearby powers, we went through our birthing pains and even our Civil War without too much interference from the rest of the world. And that helped us learn, like a protected child, how this goes. I so that's all I have to say about it. Again, it's we'll see what happens, but the liberal leadership is trying to replace Mr. Castro's son with with another version that they can control, and it won't really serve the people of Canada, in my view.
Okay, I'm going to bring Don back online here since I cleared the deck with the questions. So Don, if you want to unmic, then
yeah, John, one of the things you're mentioning about meditation, and one of the trends I think that we're seeing is this transhumanist movement. And
say that again, that got garbled.
A transhumanist movement that's being pushed.
Yes.
With the idea of us becoming, and even synthetic biology, that we become less human in that, or there's a potential to become reliant upon an AI, and I see it even happening now with people looking for answers. The answers they're going to Grok, for instance, or they're going to ChatGPT to get their answers for things. And so there becomes a reliance on these intelligence systems for making their decisions. And so do you see this as a major threat, again, to this idea of where you're thinking this might go with people connecting to the source, that it becomes a barrier to connection to that source?
Thanks. Another great question. Thank you, Don. No one ever questions the term AI. All the AI creators, I have never heard them when they were creating this understand the oxymoron that putting artificial next to intelligence is. And the reason why is that most people that are these brilliant people creating AI believe that intellect is the center of their being. So they are only making an artificial extension of their own idiocy. And I mean this with respect, because as Gurdjieff used to call collectively his disciples when he needed to talk to them as a group, if he had a group of his disciples there, he'd say, you idiots, can you dig the trench today? And you idiots will cook. Now, he taught them the real meaning of idios. And frankly, the first step to understanding what I've been talking about is to realize that I am an idiot and everyone else is, in the true sense of the word. An idiot is one who believes he's under the illusion. It's an illusion that he is separate from the whole cosmos, that he stands alone as a will against everything else. It's an illusion. The wave does not move the ocean. The shape of the wave does not move the ocean. It will try, but it does not move the ocean. It is the ocean inside the wave that is thinking these things. I consider the three things, and in this order, that are the most challenging to the future of humanity. Number three, with a number two closely behind it and much bigger, but slower. The first, number three, is nuclear war. That will end us, set us back thousands of years. Number two is the mass extinction that we're in that's caused by global warming that we are doing. And the way we're not really solving or even starting with the right premise to fix it. But the first and most dangerous thing, and I've felt it for 20 years, is artificial intelligence. As Elon Musk once called it, summoning the demon. It is the ego, not the human, that wants to create. It is the ego of Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, wanting to create his glorious monster. I think everybody who is into AI should read the cautionary tale of Shelley, Mrs. Shelley's Frankenstein, because it is our Frankenstein. Now, there have been some movies that have shown the problem with this when we surrender, because our thinking is not the issue. If we were wise, we would create an extension of ourselves that does not try to give a creation of exactly ourselves. Our artificial intelligence might be more like an Interstellar, in the movie Interstellar, where they had this robot that was very helpful for their journeys through time and space around the black hole. But he was not a human. He had the intelligence of a human. The human could program him to have a sarcastic humor. But when he was being too sarcastic, when a problem had to be solved, the astronaut said, "Okay, program, stop the sarcastic." And then he was just straight. Do not fall for the ultimate ego extinction desire of trying to create yourself like a god when you don't even know your godliness. It's there, but the mind will never know it. The godliness will become a witness of the mind someday, and then it will be able to understand that. I mean, we've had the stories. It is amazing how incredibly idiotic people are who want to transcend the human. That will be our extinction. Everything will become virtual, including enlightenment. People will think they're enlightened. It will just make us. This is one of the reasons why Osho tried to create different kinds of meditations than were done in 500 BC, when the world was so simple. In our complex world, which he celebrated its richness, he was all for science. He was all for taking risks in science, understanding there is a gamble and a risk to it. He's very pro-science. But he said the problem with science is it's flying around, flopping on the floor, because it only has one wing. And the Aquarian Age will give it a second wing. But this wing is objectivity. It studies brilliantly how the objective world of matter works. The scientist does not know himself. That's why great scientists end up accidentally creating atomic weapons and giving them to politicians. Is that wisdom, to give a politician an atomic or a thermonuclear bomb? No, scientists have intellect. People have intellect. But what they really need is wisdom. And wisdom comes from meditation, to use the intellect and to not give power to some non-soulless piece of metal or synthetic flesh that has no soul. Only a person with a soul can give up their life to the devil, the demon of a robotic approximation of themselves. And then, if you have no wisdom, you want it to be more and more intelligent. Well, remember the movie, The Forbin Project? This was back in the 60s. They had a massive, giant computer that they were able to help plug it into the world network, and he was able to make everything work and everything was fine. And then the computer got more and more intellectually intelligent, but not human. Not he he had no humanity, so he just logically thought and ultimately said, well, the way I'm suddenly seeing now, as he talked to one of his inventors, which he had conversations with, I'm starting to see now how how disorganized and how you all live in really terrible ways, and having wars and not living in a logical way. So I'm going to change all that. So what happened? They tried to unplug him, but then he had like a ray gun that wiped somebody out. But so basically, the whole world went onto a dark age by an AI supercomputer that has no life, has no soul, has never reincarnated. It's just a thing, a transitory thing, a piece of matter pretending to be you and me, and pretending even to be a Buddha, changing everything. And that is the ultimate perversion. And that is the danger of artificial intelligence. Use it as a servant. Don't turn it into a Frankenstein human facsimile thing.
Well, we've reached the witching hour, John.
Ah, there we go.
I do want to just tell the audience, please click the link in the description of this video and all the videos that I do with John. That will take you to his website, and you can purchase his periodical and his books and the readings. You know, if you want to explain a little bit about the readings and the periodical to the audience, that would be great. But before you do, John, I just want to thank everybody that has been watching the live stream. We've had a good attendance. Everyone that's been, posting questions and their comments, I appreciate it. And the ones that have been listening on X Spaces and doing the call in, I do appreciate it. So go ahead, John.
And I would even say, if you have questions, you could send them to me at Hogue Bulletin at HogueProphecy.com, or send it to the button, contact me. That's the easiest. Go to the website and do contact me. And you can, if you didn't get a question asked in this show, I will try to answer your question. I don't, if there are many of them, I can only promise that I will eventually get to them all. But I will try to answer your question or point you in a certain direction. And then the other thing again is that I have the Hogue Prophecy Report, which is monthly. It's going to be about 3 articles now, 2 to 3 articles in every 4 weeks or so. And it is where I read the world and see the future trends, which I've been doing so many decades because I've recorded everything and typed everything and dated everything that I say. I have the data that shows that my views of the world are often 80% accurate. It's a pretty good average. And so, but the way I do it is the world tells me its story through the internet, through these media. I can see I go all over the place in the internet watching what's going on. It tells me its story, and when it's telling me its story, the oracular event happens. If there's A, C, or B as the 2, 3 objective ways things can go on, it'll go, no, it's D. It's not even these. And then I'll explain it. So in a way, I do the same thing in personal readings, although it's a lot more personal. It's not more impersonal, me talking about the world. It's me reading you. And in the same way, I ask you to tell me your story, and then things happen. and I use astrology to start it. I call it the Kelly Blue Book of your body, mind, and heart. What the soul driver drives down through the road of life until it gets broken down and you either get into a new car or you stop driving that road, which always drives in circles. Because the road is called, if you haven't seen the sign of the road, it's called samsara. The spinning wheel of birthing and dying, going very fast nowhere. Until you realize nowhere, if you become a meditator, is now here. And then you break the thread of living in time. Meditation takes you to a timeless space that is your very nature. And so fear not how many times you've missed it. Fear not how many times you hope it will happen, because it's not a thing of time. You are never too soon or too late finding it. So check out my free samples, and then there will also be samples that end with a thing of coming and buying a year for $60. You get a whole year of these things, or the articles, or you can be on an automatic payment at PayPal where you stay as long as you want at $5 or more, which is the minimum.
Okay, great. So just a reminder, everyone, the links are in the description of this video and all the videos that I've done with John. Click the link, they'll take you to his website. But I, again, just want to thank everybody for participating, and the community is growing, and, I like this interactiveness. I think it's good, great questions. So, John, we're going to have to end the show, but say goodbye to everybody before we close everything down.
Goodbye to everybody.
And thank you again, everybody, for participating. Let me just stay online, John, here while I start shutting everything down here.